So again, welcome to Advanced Cultivation Techniques. I hope that you all are tuned in and ready for a great webinar, and I'm excited to get started. You know, when I think of cultivation, as I'm sure all of you, think of tending the soil, growing a crop, spending the time to bring something to bloom or to flower or to produce fruit. And I was thinking about that analogy and remembered someone who visited the club back when I was working for the Boys and Girls Clubs of the Midlands in Omaha, Nebraska. And he was coming because he had literally cultivated something. And that thing that he had cultivated was a bunch of pumpkins. He showed up with a couple hundred pumpkins right around Halloween time and said, "Hey, can I leave these here for the kids?" And we were thrilled. Well, of course we could leave those here for the kids. We'd love for the kids to have them. Now, cultivation doesn't always happen when you expect it to. And I wasn't expecting someone to show up with a truckload of pumpkins for the kids on a Friday afternoon. But in talking to this person, I learned that he was a retired pediatrician and realized he was a great prospect for the club for more than just bringing us pumpkins. And so thus began a more systematic, more planned cultivation approach for the farmer who was literally embodying cultivation. So let's talk a little bit about cultivation. First, here are the objectives for the webinar today. I hope that you'll all be able to understand and apply tips for successful cultivation of your donors. I hope that you'll learn and start utilizing a prospect rating grid to help you identify top prospects and map your cultivation strategies. I hope that you'll know the critical importance of documenting contact with donors, and I'll give you the tools to do it. And lastly, we'll apply what you've learned to donor scenarios, and that's where we'll use those chat boxes. So, to speak of cultivation, we should take just a minute to review the resource development cycle. For those who weren't in the beginning cultivation webinar, let's just go over this real quickly. Cultivation starts after you've already identified someone that you'd like to work with as a donor, qualified them, decided whether or not they're someone that is worth the time at your club and worth cultivating, and then now finally you go into the cultivation stage of things. I think a lot of times board members think that we go from identify, qualify, all the way up to ask and solicit. And this is a really helpful graphic that you can share with them to show them that there are lots of steps that happen before that. And cultivation is one stage where board members can be extremely, extremely helpful, but they don't have to do any asking at all. After the webinar, you'll be able to download this PowerPoint as a PDF, so you'll have all of these slides, and if you'd like to share this with anyone who might be helping you to cultivate donors, you can show them this kind of faucet process as a good graphic to understand where cultivation fits. I always think that cultivation is like dating. You know, your first date's when you're first getting to know that donor, and you don't ask them to marry them until you're a few dates into it. But we all know that dating can be really awkward. I love this graphic, and I feel so bad for whoever had that autocorrect fail. So dating can be awkward, and the more practiced you are at dating, the better you are at doing it. The more dates you have with someone, the more smoothly they'll go. So we're going to talk a little bit about cultivation as relationship building, just like dating. I'd like to start by asking each of you to take a moment and just jot down on a piece of paper at your desk the last charitable gift that you made, or the last meaningful charitable gift that you made to someone other than your Boys and Girls Club. Because I know we've all recently given gifts to the Boys and Girls Club. But where else? And just think about each of these questions. Who did you support? What was your primary motivation for making that gift? What was your secondary motivation for making that gift? And how did you feel after making that gift? So take just a moment and go ahead and jot down your answers to those questions. Okay, I'd love for somebody to put their answer in the chat box. Where did you make your gift? What organization did you support? So we've got a real variety of different kinds of gifts here. American Cancer, because they asked, I love it. BSU Athletics, City Year Boston, Public Radio, St. Mary's University, Walk for Breast Cancer for a friend who was walking, United Way, Nature's Conservancy, St. Jude Children's Research. So we've got lots of generosity among our RD folks out there, of course. So think about that gift. What was your primary motivation in making that gift? And I'm going to take these all off the screen so that there is more room to type another answer. What was your primary motivation in making that gift? Someone asked me. Impossible to know about making the gift when no one asks, right? Invited to their gala. Supporting a friend in a good cause. A contest giveaway. Oh, your sister works there and does great work for the state. It's all about that network that you're part of. Was asked to make a gift. Loyalty, giving back. These are the kinds of things that we're hoping our donors will say about us as well, right? But I know that often our board members in particular can feel like the motivation in giving a gift really is because they owe someone. The donor's going to feel indebted, that kind of thing. And I notice no one here said, because I felt like I had to or I was going to ruin a relationship, or because somebody was twisting my arm. What about your secondary motivation? Do you have any other reason for giving? The mission, yeah. Yes. Great cause, good organization. Again, we're not saying we felt like we had to. Our arms were being twisted. You wanted to support public radio because you used it. You have a personal history with the organization. You're connected to the organization. We all have personal reasons for why we give, and so do our donors. One last question. How did you feel after making the gift? Felt good, felt great. Anne would have loved to have given more. Like my donation would be used well, that's great. Wasn't sure I was giving enough, wish I could have done more, felt like I was doing my part. These are the kinds of things that we hope that our donors will feel too. We feel great when we make that gift. I've never given a charitable gift and afterwards felt angry about it. I've always felt fantastic. When you talk to your donors, one of the key things you're going to try to get at is what are their motivations for giving? So we know what your motivations were for giving these gifts that you gave personally. What are your donors' motivations for giving? And that's one of the really important things that you're trying to discover when you're doing cultivation. Are they giving because they're a Boys and Girls Club alum and it changed their life? Are they giving because they believe in your ability to change the future for kids? Those are the things that you'll start to get at during those dates that you're having. So, speaking of dating, a lot of times people ask, how much time should I spend on each aspect of development? It can be really overwhelming knowing that you have so many things to do across so many different people. And so I think the 4 R's are really helpful. So this is research, romance, recognition, and request. And this is a good way that you can divide up your time, with research being 25% of your time, making sure that you're meeting with the right prospects, that you've got the right folks in your portfolio. And even once you're thinking about asking them, doing more research to learn what kind of a gift is appropriate. Next is romance. So this is just spending time helping them to become connected with your organization, helping them to fall in love with you as an organization, to build that trust you all just talked about, to help them understand your mission. That's the romance. So that's really cultivation. Request, 5%. Most of your time is not going to be spent out asking people for gifts, but building up the infrastructure and the scaffolding that needs to be there before you ask for a gift. Again, this is really helpful for board members because if they don't want to do an ask, that's great. If they can get you in the door, if they can bring that prospect in for a tour, You can do the ask. That's the easy part once the relationship is built. So request is only 5%. And then recognition, which encompasses all of stewardship, thanking them for the gift, recognizing their gift, is 10%. Again, a great way to plug in your board members. But 60% of the time you should be spending is in cultivation. And so that's really why we're talking about it today. I'd like to give you 10 great tips for cultivation. These are taken from Kay Sprinkle Grace's book, Over Goal, What You Must Know to Excel at Fundraising Today. And if you're looking for a great fundraising book, you can't go wrong with anything written by Kay Sprinkle Grace. She's really fantastic. This one's available on Amazon, by the way. Okay, number 1, cultivation is everybody's job. So when we talk about the culture of philanthropy, we talk about the idea that everyone in the organization knows their role for cultivation, knows their role for stewardship, knows that they are in some way involved in the fundraising process. Everyone embraces that role, and everyone's there to help. So cultivation is everybody's job. That means that everyone in your organization can be helping in some way, whether that means that your program director is leading tours, or your cook is making special cookies for your donor, whether it means that your academic room leader is telling you great statistics that you can share with donors. Everybody can be helping you with cultivation in some way. This is a great job for board members, as I've mentioned. It's also a good job for other donors. So you could call one of your higher level donors, say one of your Millbank Society members, and talk to them about other people who are in their circle and ask if they might be willing to have a small cocktail party to have some of those folks over, or take you and one of those prospects out for coffee. Because those donors believe in you very, very much. They feel all those same feelings that you reported when we talked about the self-reflection. They care about your organization. They want to do more. So bring those donors in, and then you've got a great advocate and somebody who is really in their program. Becky, your audio is lost? Does anyone else? Now it's back. Okay. We don't know what's happening with the audio there in Bemidji, but hopefully everybody else can hear. So cultivation is everybody's job, not just yours as the CEO or development person. Our second tip from Kay Sprinkle Grace is cultivation is strategic. This means you need a cultivation plan. It isn't just a series of sort of random, unrelated contacts, but a clear plan with steps for cultivation and clear follow-up. I'm going to give you a template after the webinar that is a cultivation plan that lists all the steps where you can fill in all of the steps that you're going to do. So this might be, my plan is, first I'm going to get introduced to this person by my donor, then I'll have them in for a tour, I'll invite them to be a Youth of the Year judge, I'm going to invite them to sit at the president's table at our gala. These are our steps, our strategic steps. And the strategy will be always changing based on what things happen. So if I'm visiting with someone and I learn that they got a basketball scholarship to college because they played basketball with the Boys and Girls Club, you bet I'm going to invite them to one of our club's basketball games. So the cultivation may change a little bit as you get to know people. So it's a dynamic plan and it's very strategic. It's also systematic. That means that there is some kind of a system in place for who does what and for tracking all of your contact with your donors. That way you have a nice clear record of what's gone on. Much as you'd like, it's hard to remember everything you've done with every donor. And so if you can go back through your records and say, oh yeah, I did call them on their birthday, that's right. Or, oh, they did mention they were going on a cruise to Alaska. Now I remember. That can be really helpful when you have those conversations. Much as I wish I could remember every interaction I've ever had for donors, sometimes I can't even remember what I had for breakfast. So I always want to write it down. Next, it's coordinated. That means that all contact is reported and tracked by a central person, and that everyone involved in the cultivation of a prospect knows who is doing what. That way we don't have people going rogue and, for example, asking for a gift when it wasn't time in the strategy, or going in and asking someone for a $1,000 annual campaign gift when you had them targeted for a $25,000 gift for your capital campaign. That way we don't have our donors say things like, don't you people talk to each other? And sometimes with lots of really enthusiastic and well-meaning volunteers, this can be the case. So having prospect meetings so that you can update folks on the strategy, put input on what you've learned, is an important way to keep all the contact coordinated. Next, cultivation is not just for small donors. It's equal opportunity. Of course, you're going to spend more money on your larger or more time on your larger donors than your smaller donors. But one thing that we read a lot about are wealthier people making sort of an introductory gift. So someone who you know has a far larger capacity might give you $25 or $50 to see how you handle it. And so in some cases, folks who are giving you smaller amounts of money might need to be cultivated just like as if they were giving you larger amounts of money. Next, it isn't just personal interaction that results in cultivation. And this can be one of the answers to how do I cultivate folks who are giving smaller amounts of money. Your newsletters, your website, Facebook, Twitter, those are all examples of ways that you can interact with donors, cultivate donors without having to see them face to face. It's not a substitution for personal interaction, but it's a great supplement. If you don't have the money for a printed newsletter, an email newsletter works great if you're able to capture the email addresses you need to have a good mailing list. MailChimp and Constant Contact both have great free programs for nonprofits and youth-serving nonprofits that will help you to send out those newsletters. There are templates that are pre-populated. They'll let you track your results so you know how well your newsletters are working and who's reading them. And that can be a good way to get out and see people. Now, people have trouble getting the email addresses of their donors. So here are a couple of techniques that clubs have used that have been helpful. One was doing a door prize at the special event where people either drop in a business card or fill out a form, and that form asks them their email address. And you fill out that form, you can win a club t-shirt or something like that, and then you capture all that data in Constant Contact. Yes, Federico, I did say there's a free for youth-serving nonprofits from Constant Contact that you can use. So that's a great program. Another technique that clubs have used is including an email address line on their reply vehicle for any kind of a donation mailing. So when someone sends in a gift with your annual mailing, you ask for their email address there. Not everybody's going to give it to you. It's hard to get those email addresses, but it's worth the effort because it can save you some money and help you to keep cultivating people in a way that's essentially free. So it isn't just personal interaction. There are other ways to cultivate your donors as well. It can be unexpected. Sometimes donors come to you. For example, my doctor who showed up with the truckload of pumpkins, he just came to me. What's important, though, is that I have the infrastructure in place to be strategic around how am I going to cultivate this person now that he's just showed up. Anytime you're out in the community is an opportunity to meet people who might be interested in being donors to your mission. So keep your eyes and ears open and be sure to take notes. One strategy that I've seen people do that works really well is when someone hands you their business card, after you're done talking to them, write a note for yourself on the back, like, this is the guy that dropped off all the pumpkins, or this is a former club kid who's interested in literacy, or he had a basketball scholarship to college because of the club. So that you got it in your mind right then and you can record it a little bit in a little more detail when you're somewhere back at your office. So it can be unexpected. It doesn't always happen strategically and right when you'd think. This is really the most important part about cultivation, is this tip number 8. It leads to an ask. A lot of times development people will get so into doing all of these actions with their prospective donors that the ask kind of goes by the wayside. And it's great to build a relationship with them, and we want and need to build a relationship. We want to be close to our donors. We want to be their charity of choice. We want them to say all the great things about us that you all said about the charities that you're supporting. But eventually, we need it to lead to an ask. You don't want to become such close friends with your donors that you can't ask them for a gift, and you don't want to drag it on and forever and ever and ever. Eventually, there has to be an ask that's planned. And that's why being strategic and planned is really helpful, because you know what date you're targeting to do that ask. This is interesting, I think. Corporations, foundations, and individuals are basically the same. With corporations and foundations, the timeline is already set out for you. You know when you need to have your proposal in, you know how much you can ask for, some of those kinds of things. But corporations and foundations still need some cultivation, some education, some exposure to your mission, some exposure to your great outcomes before they're going to be willing to make a gift. So you also need to cultivate corporations and foundations. And lastly, cultivation should have a budget. It doesn't need to be a huge budget, but there needs to be a budget there. You need to be able to occasionally take someone out for coffee. You need to be able to print your impact reports or whatever you give to people as a brochure when they come through the club. You need to have enough money for postage to send people notes. You need to have enough money to send out those newsletters and things. So as you are entering budgeting season, if you're the development person, be prepared to put forth a rationale for why you need to have a small budget for cultivation. If you're a one-person shop and you're the CEO and you're the person who does the development work, put a budget for cultivation in. It doesn't need to be huge, but you do need to have a little bit of money there to support what you're doing. In doing so, too, it helps to build that culture of philanthropy by reminding your board that we need to be planning for philanthropy. The next thing that I'd like to do is talk to you a little bit about rating your prospects, because you can't be cultivating every single donor all at the same time. So this is included as an attachment after the webinar. There's also a handout that explains kind of how to add points for each individual person. And you can print out the prospect rating grid, which is the next slide and is blank. You can use this to plot those people who you think will be kind of your more major prospects to really get a feeling for what kind of work needs to be done to move them into the range where they're able to make a gift. So this shows that donors sort of can be measured on two different axes. The vertical axis is philanthropic capacity. So this is how much money does this person have to give away, and how philanthropic are they? So the richest person in town is irrelevant if they never give any of their money away to nonprofits. Then across the bottom is access and involvement to the club. I have a colleague who calls this club love. So access means, are you able to get in to talk to this person, to build a relationship with this person? Usually it's your board who's going to do that for you. So do you have access in some way? If you don't have access, all of the philanthropic capability in the world won't matter. And you shouldn't spend time trying to cultivate someone like that because there are plenty of other fish in the sea. Involvement, this is the thing that you're really able to impact as a club staff member. This is how involved are they with our mission? Have they been on a tour? Do they know our kids? Have we gotten them to be a Youth of the Year judge? Or maybe come in and read books to the kids, help with an art project, give us advice about our website, be on a planning committee, anything like that. The ideal prospect then has high philanthropic capacity and generosity. We have access to them, and we've gotten them involved in the club. And what you can do is just plot where your prospects fall. Are they cold, warm, or hot? And if they're cold, are there things that you can do to move them over into warm? And once they're warm, you can move them over to hot. Angel's asking what criteria you use in assigning a 1 through 9 on philanthropic capacity. Usually when this is used, a 9 would be someone with multi-million-dollar capacity, but I would also say you can scale this to your own community and to your own club based on what makes sense for your community. As long as you kind of have that scale developed and you stick to it, that's probably what's going to make it the most useful. But 9 is the very most wealthy, wonderful, perfect, awesomely generous donor for your community that you can think of. Good question. In the handout, too, there are some suggestions for how many points you might give to someone based on their involvement in various ways. So you can see on here, program volunteer, board or committee, current donor, previous donor, spousal engagement. Those things all sort of help you to rank this person. If you have someone who has a lower philanthropic capacity, but a high access and involvement to the club, that's a great person to cultivate for a planned gift. Because planned gifts are those sort of ultimate lifetime gifts, and lots of times people do have assets even if they're cash poor. It might be their land, it might be personal property, it might be their retirement account, a paid life insurance policy, or a bequest from their estate. So if someone doesn't have high philanthropic capacity, but they're really interested in your club, be creative in thinking about how you can talk to them about making a gift, and go ahead and keep trying to cultivate them. This next slide is just a blank version so that you'll have it for your files. And now we're going to talk a little bit about developing a cultivation plan. There's a cultivation plan that'll be attached in the downloads, and here's some advice for you. If you're a president or CEO, you need to do a cultivation plan for at least your top 10 donors. If you're an RD person, you can handle quite a few more than that, maybe your top 25 or 50. Update the plan monthly. That's really important because things are going to change, as we discussed, the longer that you're spending time cultivating these people. Next, assign at least one specific task per donor to a volunteer or a staff member. So it isn't just the CEO or the RD person who's doing this cultivation, but each donor is getting touches from other people in the organization. And of course, you can have more people help you too. And a good rule of thumb is to try to do at least one cultivation touch per day. Not per day per donor, but basically when you get into the office to think, okay, what can I do in terms of cultivation today? And if you're having one action per day, it's a lot more manageable, but you'll still be making plenty of progress. Not one per person per day, because that would be a lot of work and a lot of contact. Speaking of contact, you should be documenting your contact with your donors through what is called a contact report. And I have a download for you after the webinar that explains why to do a contact report, how to do a contact report, and there's a sample contact report contained there. Now, your database, if you have a dedicated relationship management database, it will have a contact sort of screen or capability already built in. That's a great way to do your contact reports. That's a preferred method for doing your contact reports. If your database doesn't have that, though, you can just fill out the sheets on the attachment that I'm giving you to download and save them in that donor's constituent file. This is absolutely an industry best practice. We know that there can be a lot of turnover in boys and girls clubs, and when everyone on this phone call wins the lottery and becomes a donor instead of an RD person or a staff member, we're going to want all of your work to be recorded in the database somehow. So please, please do contact reports. This will give you a whole narrative across the entire history of the club's time with the donor. And think about how many times you yourself have wished that you had more information about a donor before you were going to talk to them. You can be the person that breaks that cycle. So a contact report documents who, what, where, when, and why, as well as the outcome of significant or important interactions with the donor. So if you're going to the movie and you run into your donor and you say hi to them, wasn't that a great movie? That is not important to include in your database. If you run into the donor at the movie and afterwards you go out for a cup of coffee and talk about the problems facing kids, that should be recorded in your database. Documenting contact is going to ensure that whatever your solicitation team is, they're always really well informed and that everybody's on the same page. This will prevent mistakes like someone soliciting your donor when they shouldn't, for example. And then this is where you record next steps. So following our conversation, I agreed to send our impact report and asked if Susan would come and read books to the kids on October 30th. Recording those next steps so you always know where you are in the process. So exactly what to document. After face-to-face meetings with prospects, you should fill out a contact report. After meetings where prospects are discussed, where you and your board or you and your volunteers create a strategy, you should document that as well. After significant communication with your donor, for example, you have a phone call and they tell you that they're selling their business. That's something you would want to write down. You get a letter that says that they're going to be changing jobs. You want to write that stuff down. You want to put that in their folder. After you get a response, positive or negative, to a proposal that you've presented, that's something to document. Anytime you learn new information that might help inform the strategy, that's something that you're going to want to include. So maybe you're talking to your prospect and they say, our daughter is going to start helping us with our philanthropic giving. We've asked her to join our foundation. Good to have that documented so you can start talking to that daughter too. What a good piece of information to have recorded for anyone in the future or now. Whenever you have a next step or a contact date that's determined, you decide we're going to ask Eloise to make a gift to the club and we're going to see her on August 18th to do that. You want to have that documented. And when an action results in a move, and a move means that you are taking someone closer through that pipeline to where they're going to the next stage of the pipeline. So when the action results in someone going from cultivation to that briefing stage where we're getting everyone ready to do a proposal, when we're getting ready to ask, when this person has moved down the pipeline, you want to document it. This is an example of what a contact report looks like. Again, these are probably in your database, but if you don't have one, this form will work just fine. It's just capturing the important information from your visit. Okay, we're going to try using that chat box again. I hope it works. It's really nice to hear from all of you, and I think more importantly for all of you to hear from each other. We don't always get to meet our colleagues, and on these webinars we have folks from all across the country. So there's going to be some really interesting perspectives here. So we're going to strategize. I have 3 different scenarios, sort of cultivation scenarios, and I'd like to spend some time thinking about how will we cultivate this person. So what we'll do is read each scenario. We'll ask you for steps to cultivate this prospect. If this were your prospect, what would you do? And we'll gather at least 3 steps for each prospect. And then what would the goal of cultivation be for this prospect? What will the proposal be for, if we're going to do a proposal? And what obstacles or barriers do you anticipate? So I'll talk you through each of these and ask for responses as we go through these. And now I'm going to read you the first scenario. Catherine and David Jimenez are prominent local philanthropists. They have supported the YMCA, the Children's Hospital, and the Humane Society with gifts of $100,000 plus. Their names are prominently displayed on buildings all over town. David started coaching the club's track team last year and has enjoyed the experience immensely. Catherine has attended the Steak and Burger fundraiser for the last 3 years. Both toured the club 6 months ago, and since then the staff has been in regular contact with them. Catherine and David have twin boys who will be starting college at Northwestern in the fall. Okay, so the first thing I'd like to do is ask if you could, yes, the question box and the chat box, either one will work, Vaughn. In the question box or the chat box, just fill in what are 3 steps that you think that we could do at the club to cultivate this prospect. You could each just fill in one. So how might we cultivate the Jimenez family? All right, this is creative. Invite their sons to the club to come and talk about life after high school graduation. Their kids are going to college, so getting them involved and bringing the family in, fantastic. We're going to invite them to come to some more of our fundraising events. They can see a little bit more mission. They can get a little bit more involved. Invite them to volunteer on the Steak and Burger Committee. So we know that they've been coming to Steak and Burger, so why not get them involved as volunteers? And so often, money comes after involvement. If you can get someone to volunteer, especially someone with this kind of capacity, you're going to be able to get a gift. Have the kids make them a thank you for their involvement with track. So all the track kids are sending out thank you notes, highlighting them in a newsletter so that other people can see Dad's involvement with the track team. All of these are great ways to start getting the Jimenez family involved. Awesome. Okay, the next question is, what's the goal? What should the proposal be for? What would the goal of cultivation be here, in your opinion? A major gift. You bet. We know they have the capacity. They're already volunteering. We're getting them nicely involved. So we don't want to ask them for $50 or $100, right? And see, here we say something with naming rights associated with it. And what Angel noticed in this little write-up is that their names are already on lots of buildings in town. That may be a motivation for them to give. So that's a piece of information that we kind of got through our research. Asking them to think about a legacy gift or an endowment. I mean, why not? It might depend on what their current giving is. That's absolutely right. If they haven't made any gifts, we probably wouldn't jump right to a major gift. To have an additional conversation with them about what they may want to support. Healthy lifestyles, a certain outcome area. This is a really good point too, because we sometimes think we know what they want to support, but there is not anything in the world wrong with asking, what would you like to see, what would you like your legacy to be here at the club? We've been very supportive as volunteers. Have you thought about making a gift? What would you be interested in supporting? There was one fundraiser I worked with who would ask, what do you hope to accomplish with your money that would be meaningful to you? And it's a great question. It's a great conversation starter. So we've got some really good ideas for what we're going to ask them for. Now, the last question with this couple is, what barriers do we anticipate? What obstacles are present? The college expenses are certainly an obstacle, especially since they have twins. Geez. They might have donor fatigue. They're giving all over the community. They've already given to multiple organizations. Their gifts may be divided. Their other charitable interests. These are all things that really need to be considered. One thing that you might be able to do to address that with these folks is ask for a multi-year commitment, or get them excited about a program that you could start researching and setting up now that might start once some of those commitments are closed out. So after you're finished with your gift to the YMCA, after you're finished with your gift to the Humane Society, would you be interested? Right, we may not have the strongest relationship with them compared to the other charities. So that's why we got to do this cultivation, to build that relationship with this couple. You guys are awesome. It's a lot more fun to do a webinar when there's people talking, I got to tell you. Okay, I've got another scenario for you. Here we go. Larry Harrington has been a board member for 5 years. He's the owner of an extremely successful auto dealership, which has been in his family for generations. In 2012, the dealership expanded, doubling in size. In Larry's opinion, education is the single most important factor in a young person's development. Larry has helped as a Youth of the Year judge, and he comes in once a month to assist with Homework Power Hour. Larry has been an annual donor for 7 years and has always given $5,000 to the club. Okay, so to start, what are 3 steps, or each of you could maybe name a step, to cultivate this prospect? How are we going to cultivate Larry? Oh, and invite him to the high school graduation from some of the members that he's been helping with. Ask him for advice. That's such a good way to go. If you want advice, ask for money. If you want money, ask for advice. Same thing, inviting him to be part of a program committee. He probably has thoughts and feedback on the education program. So he's a board member. Let's get him involved on a committee. Cultivate the business in addition to Larry personally. Why not, right? He may have some charitable giving dollars in his business, and that's going to get him more involved. Oh, job shadow for his dealership with the kids, right? Bring the kids out to the dealership, building that connection, getting the donor more involved and invested. These are all fantastic strategies. We're going to just try to get him a little bit more involved so his giving kind of increases a little bit. What's the ultimate goal of cultivation for Mr. Harrington? What might a proposal be for? What are we working toward? Could he endow his annual gift? I know your annual gift's been very important to you, and with a gift of $100,000, your interest would result in $5,000 a year. Maybe a planned gift. If he's been a board member, if the club has been important to his family, the idea of a legacy gift could be very persuasive. Giving to a scholarship fund, since we know that he really, really cares about education. Asking him to double his annual gift. Certainly at this point, he is a prime candidate to double his annual gift. And I bet you could even start asking him to double his annual gift while working on one of these strategies for a dedicated fund, something like that. Asking him to identify some new prospects would be a great way not only to cultivate him, but to get you some new great prospects in the club. Fantastic. Okay, so lastly, what objections or concerns do we anticipate? That he might rotate off the board. Fantastic. Yep, we want to keep him engaged before he goes off the board, because sometimes those board members fall off the face of the earth. He may feel that he supports at an adequate level now. He's giving very generously. He does seem like he's ready, can't think of any. He already gives his time and money, so he may feel like he's already doing enough for the club. Debt from the expansion. If he just expanded and doubled the size of his dealership, he may not be financially solvent enough to do this. Make sure I didn't miss anybody. He may be spread too thin with too many activities. That's always something to consider. And we're going to keep working with him so we can become his charity of choice, so that we can become the number one, his first love. Rather than him becoming less engaged with us, we want him to become less engaged with, someone who doesn't do as great a work as we do. Okay, here's the last scenario. I'll switch the slide for you here. Mark Owen is CEO of a major health insurance company whose headquarters are in your town. He's a marathon runner and overall fitness addict. His insurance company is a regular special event sponsor. Following last year's gala, Mark asked if he could volunteer at the club, teaching kids about long-distance running. Together, you build a partnership with the middle school near the club, and you were able to use their track. Mark came to the club every weekday for 3 months and sponsored the team traveling to a statewide cross-country championship. After the championship, the kids invited Mark to a party where they served healthy food in honor of his support. They presented him with a lifetime Boys and Girls Club membership card and a team photo. A friend who visited Mark recently saw the card and photo displayed in Mark's office. Okay, so for starters, how might we cultivate Mark? Tell him more about the club so he can tell others. It may be that he really just knows about the track sort of program. You want him to be sure he knows about the whole spectrum of activities. Ask for his help getting his friend involved in the club, the friend who saw the picture from the kids. Seek his advice about healthy lifestyles. What else can we do in the club? This track program was great, but what else can we do? Honor him at next year's gala. He came in every day for months. Let's give him an award. Have him sponsor the running program again. Invite him to the gala again. And make sure that he really knows what's going on at the club. Fantastic. I like that everybody's thinking beyond sort of just we'll send him a thank you note and call it good. We've got lots of activities that'll get him a lot more engaged. So the next thing we want to think about with Mark is what's the goal of cultivation for this prospect? What kind of proposal would you ultimately work toward with him? Have him sponsor healthy lifestyles. Maybe do a matching or challenge grant with his insurance company. Get the insurance company to sponsor a complete healthy lifestyles program that includes your sports and your meals. That's fantastic. Supporting the second phase of the running program. Maybe this is phase 2. We're going to build it up a little bit more. Maybe legacy. Get his name on the program. Ask him to join the board. Sure. He's obviously interested in the club and he's got great connections. All right. These are great ideas. And lastly, do we anticipate any obstacles? Do we anticipate any obstacles or barriers? If he's moved on to something else, sort of like, I've been there, I've done that, I've already made a gift, I'm good to go. He may have a hard time seeing the other work at the club beyond the track. He may not care about anything besides the track. This might be it. His time, he may be really busy since he's the CEO of a great big company. So those will be some challenges for you to think about going into talking about this with Mark. Fantastic. Thank you all so much for making that work. I wish we could talk, but I do appreciate that you're here nonetheless. So you've kind of gotten the experience now of walking through cultivation planning. And you were able to come up with some absolutely fantastic ideas for how you would cultivate these people. You were very strategic about it. And so you can do the same thing when you're planning cultivation for your own donors. Think about what are the next few steps. Think about what's the goal of this cultivation and anticipate any problems or objectives like you just did. So I do have some good resources for you to download. They are available in the handouts box on your dashboard. And here's what they include. There's a PDF of this PowerPoint. There's a handout that's just called Cultivation Overview, which might be helpful if you're newer to RD for you to read. And if not, you might want to share it with your board. There's that prospect contact form and directions for doing a contact report. There's a prospect engagement and cultivation tracking worksheet. It's really just an Excel file, but that way you wouldn't have to start from scratch. And then there's directions for using a prospect rating grid. I found this cartoon. I thought it was pretty funny. Goldilocks says, my first ask was too high. My second one was too low, but this one was just right. And that's when Goldilocks joins the board of the Porridge Appreciation Association. And you'll see she gave it the Millbank level there. So at this point, I'd love to see if there are any questions that anyone would like to have answered or general comments about cultivation that you'd like to share with the group. You can type them right in that question box. Okay, if you don't have any questions, I'll leave you with my parting comments. As always, if you have questions, comments, concerns, anything that has to do with this webinar series, suggestions for other topics you'd like to have covered, etc., my phone number and email address are there on the screen. I would love to hear from you anytime. Absolutely feel free. Oh, here's a question we've got. When cultivating, do you focus on the individual or the business he or she works for? Or just base it off the situation? I would say base it off the situation. Sometimes you might end up cultivating both. You are more likely to get individual support because more of the dollars that are given charitably each year are given by individuals. So it would probably be my approach to start by cultivating the individual, building up that individual relationship, and then maybe start looking at adding the business as well. But you're likely to be able to get larger gifts and more sustaining gifts through individuals. But as you say, Megan, basing it off the situation is probably a really good idea. One last thing I'll add, we do have a couple of newsletters that we send out to RD folks, board members, CEOs, etc. If you are not currently receiving the newsletter RD Pro and you would like to subscribe, you can just put your email address right here in the questions box and I'll make sure that you get added to the list. It only comes out once every quarter, so we're not going to flood your inbox, but it does have some really good techniques and things that you might be able to use. So if you'd like to add your email address there, please feel free. Our next webinar coming up next week is about stewardship. I hope to see you all there. And please do download all of the things that are here for you as resources. I hope that they're very helpful. And thank you all so much for being here and happy cultivating. Bye.